Welcome to Unexpected Points. I thought I lost Ben there for a second on the stream as he popped out. Kevin Cole here, joined by Benjamin Robinson, the mock guru. We love his mocks. We don't mock his mocks, though. Don't do that.
Thank you.
Actually, there was a great suggestion yesterday. Maybe this could be a spin-off account for you, where I was wondering why there was not. Actually, my mic is. Let me. What if my mic's gonna change? Do you notice a change there? All right. So there was a. I was wondering why there was not an account that, after every pick, has like collected a number of screenshots of just wrong predictions on it. Screenshots from mock drafts, screenshots from tweets, screenshots from anything, and then immediately spams them out. Overconfident take on every pick. And then I think it may have been Brad Spielberger, formerly of PFF, now working as an agent in that agent world. So now probably leaking information to Adam on an hourly basis. He replied back, he's like, yes, there should be an account called Mocking the Mocks. What do you think about that?
You know, I don't mind it. Yeah, I have been trying to do some bookmarking of some of these as I've seen them online, but there's just too many of them.
There are.
Yeah,
Lots of, mocking the GMs. We're gonna do that. We're gonna do some of that during this broadcast. I have a feeling.
Yeah, I mean, someone who has more time than me should do it. But yes.
Okay, well, we'll get on that. AI will figure that out. These are the important issues that.
Oh, geez.
That will be figured out by AI. Okay, we got a lot to talk about. It was one of these. The funny thing about this draft was it started off and it was like chalk. I'm bored. We're going through. Okay, let me break down specifically, like, just so I don't have to remember off the top of my head, because my memory is poor and my sleep has not been great recently. So of course, Caleb Williams, chalk. Jaden Daniels, chalk. Drake May, yeah, there's some questions what's going on there. RIP to Pretty Ricky, or whoever that account is, who
only good at breaking free agency news. He must only know agents who.
Yeah, exactly. See, he does know agents, and like, so here's the thing: is like free agency news. People know this information, right? People know like the parameters around contracts that are being talked about. Like, that's spreading throughout the ecosystem. But Adam Schefter, whoever, can't say, oh, this is being talked about, this is being talked about, this is being talked about. So like, that information's out there. I could understand how someone has that information and how they could, quote unquote, break it before an insider, because the insiders also have that information, but they can't send it out. Now, this type of information, like who's going to make a draft pick, that's a little bit more difficult. If the insiders had that information, unless they're sworn to secrecy, and then they wouldn't tell anyone else, they wouldn't be saying it. So yeah, so poor Pretty Ricky went down pretty hard on his prediction of either a trade back or JJ McCarthy going there. And you know what's weird about this? Okay, sorry, this is totally off this tangent, but this is how we do it on this live stream. So
always.
Everyone hates everybody on social media. The most shared things ever are all negative engagement, right? Yet, if you are an anonymous account tweeting out NFL rumors, people will come to your defense like you're a family member or something. Like, I couldn't believe it when I was making fun of this guy. I had all these simps in my replies being like, "Oh, you don't talk bad about him." I'm like, do you know this guy? Like,
unless it's Dove Kleiman. Unless it's Dove Kleiman, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, Dove Kleiman doesn't break shit. He just misquotes people and puts it out
selectively quote people.
Select. It's
don't tell your wife about that.
What was the Trumpism about truth? Not your truths. You're not real truths. Oh, alternate facts. Yeah. So yeah. alternate true quotes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he went down in flames on that one, but everyone else was saying that, like, there's a few true kind of real NFL people who were saying they strongly suspected it was going to be Drake May, and it was. Yeah. Harrison, chalk, alt to the Chargers. I mean, not chalk, but I see why that one ended happening. So that's probably the first one we can talk about here.
Yeah.
I'll fade Harbaugh talking about offensive tackles being weapons. Did you see this?
He's so good. He just is such a quote.
I know he's very entertaining, very entertaining. Yes. But don't take any I mean, I don't take any of that seriously because the spear of the tip, he's kinda got, like, a little bit of Mike Leach vibes in the fact that I could see him just start, like, rambling about something during a meeting, and everyone's sitting around like, "What are we doing here for an hour and a half?" Um, because, like, spear of the tip, all that sort of stuff, offensive weapons, that just sounds like a dude who wants to run the ball a lot, because it's pretty hard to call a pass blocker the spear of the tip in an offensive weapon, right?
Yeah. I mean, the pick makes sense. I think a lot of people thought that the Chargers were going to be going offensive line. You look back in the years that Harbaugh was involved in the decision making with the 49ers, they really didn't go after wide receivers very early. I know he inherited Crabtree. I don't think he drafted him. Um, so there's that. He really loves investing on the lines. So to me, I think there was a lot of kind of noise about that. If he's kind of the one who's like kind of leading the team building effort with the assist of Joe Ortiz, from formerly of the Ravens. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of to me like Alt or Neighbors. I don't know if the decision making would have been different if Marvin Harrison Jr. was there. Um, you know, there is something to be said that they didn't have a lot of depth at tackle, and Slater was hurt last year, and you could just tell that there's things kind of caved around them. Maybe you kind of hope that Quentin Johnson can somewhat improve. I mean, you kind of have to at some point. I don't know if you think he's totally a lost cause. People just seem to have forgotten that they lost. Quentin Johnson was a top draft pick last year.
Yeah,
I
it's
think he
tough
was the
to I don't
second
really
wide receiver
remember I don't
they went to.
remember, like, guys who can't catch the football turning around their careers, but it's possible. I don't know if that's one of the things, but yeah.
Who knows? I mean, some of it is, I mean, it was very disappointing last year when, you know, there was lack of competition and he really couldn't get it. So, but maybe
Yeah.
if the offense gets simpler or something, or they kind of maybe build more around him somehow. Like, I mean, I think that he could get worse, but I mean, there's a chance that he improves.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you kind of maybe there's also the idea that, hey, they need more than one receiver. Get the offensive lineman that you want to get, and then get more receivers. Everyone was talking about how deep this class is at receiver and at tackle, and they are probably going to dip into both of those positions potentially today. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised to see them draft a receiver. I thought that they were a big trade candidate just because they really have a problem in terms of cost control. I mean, there was these kind of really funny, I don't know if you saw the reporting from Schefter that came out about teams going to the Chargers to ask about Herbert, in a trade, and it turns out that if they did trade him, they would take a cap hit that would be bigger than the current cap availability that they have. So
Mhm.
they're in a real tough place financially, and I thought that getting more draft picks would help that in terms of down the line. But you could do worse than taking probably the top, premium position player on the board that wouldn't be a quarterback.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to be like a analytical supremacist here, you could say trade down and grab one of these other tackles that I guess we had tackles going all the way into 25. I mean, I
I
don't know
think
if those actually 29,
people
I guess,
thought
yeah.
the market was going to be more robust for trades, and it just turns out it
Oh
wasn't.
yeah. Mocking the
Um,
mocks could have screenshotted Daniel
yeah.
Jeremiah saying everyone's trading up for an offensive tackle.
I mean, the
Um,
the other piece
that
of
didn't
that,
happen.
yeah, that
Oh,
was I
maybe it
think
did
the big
happen.
reason.
Did it
It
happen? No, 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 no. Two people traded back and then got offensive tackles. The Cowboys went
Yes.
back when they in their trade with Detroit and got an offensive tackle, and then the Jets went back and got an offensive tackle. So mocking the mocks
Yes.
could have been on him on that one.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece too is just the trade market was much less robust, and then also there was this last minute kind of or relatively last minute in the draft process steam on J.C. Latham from Alabama, who ended up going at pick number 7 to the Titans, who were huge favorites to draft an offensive lineman.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
that's one where we don't know
yeah.
necessarily if they were that high on him, but that was like it's a very strange combination for them. It was a team that seems fairly bereft of talent generally, yet the most strong link to position of need in a way, or to a singular position where you don't think those two things would go hand in hand, but they seem like they went that way with the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is that I think the other piece is that their offensive line was just so porous last year. They brought in Andre Dillard in free agency, and he was just a total mess. And so, they drafted Peter Skoronsky last year from Northwestern, who in theory should play tackle, but I think they're playing him at guard.
Yeah.
And so they really do. They drafted Nicholas Petit-Frere last year from Ohio State as well. So
Yeah, they've
yeah,
been
the other
bottom
thing is that
5. They've been
yeah,
bottom 5 in, like, PFF grading for a number of years. So, I mean, I get
yeah,
it. I
and
get
Bill
it.
Callahan. Bill
Yeah.
Callahan, the coach's dad, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. I think that they were going to want. I think they addressed wide receiver in free agency with the big Calvin Ridley signing. They have Traylon Burks, they have DeAndre Hopkins. So if you thought that they were going to go, wide receiver or something like that, I don't think that they were going to be as willing to make an investment at QB again for like the second draft in a row with like top 100 pick. But they're giving Will Levis a shot, and they want to protect him. They felt like they added to the offense on the weapons side in free agency. So I think that's the story there.
Yeah, yeah. So just from a quick, like, analytical take here on, I guess it would be Neighbors versus Joe Alt. We're not getting the memes of Penny Sewell versus Jamar Chase in this situation. I think because, number one, I don't think Joe Alt is seen as a Penny Sewell sort of level of prospect, even though he's going earlier now in the draft. And I don't think Malik Neighbors is really seen as a Jamar Chase either, even though some people were saying that he's fairly close to there. It's clear in this class that Marvin Harrison, like, might legitimately be like the generational prospect that people talk about. If you compared him, like if you were going to line him up versus other guys, maybe Chase would be close. So it would be tough there.
You finally come around over the last week to the generational take that I had. I'm so happy to hear that. We should be drafting him in fantasy all off season.
Yeah, one out of every 35 generational takes ends up being correct.
I'm just happy that he went at 4 because everyone was saying, I've talked to teams and some people think Neighbors is as good as Harrison.
Yeah, that's like the some people think Ryan Leaf is going to go before Peyton Manning type of thing. Like, you have to make a story out of it.
Yeah, I mean, just like Harrison is just like one of the best prospects at wide receiver we've had in years. I mean, the only thing that could make him less good of a prospect is the incomplete data on testing. I think if he had tested, then maybe they could stack him up. I think this is just kind of being too uncertain. They're being too uncertain here. There are other ways to measure athleticism than the combine, and so the tracking data showed that Harrison is definitely athletic enough.
Yeah, so, I mean, and the lack of testing data has not hurt any top prospects. I mean, freaking Corey Davis didn't test or do anything and went 5th overall. So, like, there's Drake London, Ruggs,
Parsons,
a bunch of guys.
Drake London, like you said, Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase, like a bunch of those players didn't test because there was no combine.
Okay, so. But what I will say from an analytical perspective is, if you are going to go, let's say your first 2 rounds, let's say you wanted to go like tackle wide receiver, like the Chargers may go in some order, it's vastly better by the historical curves of surplus value and things like that to go tackle early. Tackle's the number 1 position of non-quarterback position to take early in the draft. And then there's traditionally a lot more availability when it comes to wide receiver as we're looking later on in the draft. And if we look at like guys by the consensus big board who are still left at this point in time, and we got a number of receivers here. We got Mitchell, McConkey, Coleman, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson. There's a bunch of guys who they could potentially hop on here. And there's really nothing when it comes to, there's some stuff when it comes to tackle, but it's just not nearly the level of player. So I think that's also the case for doing what the Chargers did, whether or not we're talking about the tip of the spear or whatever other nonsense that we want to get into there, that this is just a better like overall value proposition for them to take a shot on someone in their early second round and their next pick that's coming up versus what we saw them do there. Okay. Neighbors.
Yeah. I said the same thing. I said kind of the reverse thing in the Chase Sewell situation.
Yeah.
And the Bengals ended up taking Jackson Carman in the second round, who's been a total dud at tackle.
Yeah.
But it turns out that the upside case with the wide receiver. So it's the difference between the upside case and the mean outcome case or the median outcome case. Like the median outcome, Sewell and Alt are probably better, but Chase and Neighbors gives you that high ceiling outcome that you just probably won't see with the tackle.
Well, I also think there may be a little bit of a difference. I think there was a confusion. We don't spend too much time on this, so we'll wrap it up after this. But I think there was a little confusion when it came to Joe Burrow that he took so many sacks as a rookie because of the offensive line being so bad. I mean, it was bad, but we've learned about Joe Burrow that he likes to eat some sacks sometimes
Open-minded,
versus
yeah.
Herbert's pretty good at getting rid of the ball. Now, there's obviously injury concerns there, even still, with Herbert getting rid of the ball, but he's excellent at getting rid of the ball. So it's also a situation where I don't think like there's as big of an issue there. Well, anyway, I'm just saying there's confusion when it comes to those sorts of things as to being able to parse out everything there. Okay. Obviously, we got to go to Michael Penix at number 8. I mean, there's not a lot that I think we can add to the discussion of like. I will say one thing. Here's what I'll add to the discussion because everyone's adding the obvious things, which is like, what the hell are you doing? Um, the the supposition is if you like a year from now, if you didn't draft him, let's say a year from now, you've burned through your signing bonus portion of Kirk Cousins's like contract. You take a cap hit if you get rid of him, but it's not that big a deal. There's probably like in the range of scenarios, unless they end up strongly winning the division and advancing maybe even more than a round in the playoffs, there's probably some contingent of the fan base next year who is like, we need to draft a quarterback to really have a chance to go to the next level in that circumstance. That's just what happens when you're Kirk Cousins. I'm sorry. Like, but after the honeymoon period, everyone's like, half of the fan base is like, when are we going to replace you? So, like, there is that, but like, you have to have done some scouting before you cut a check for $50 million of a signing bonus for him. Arthur Blake's like, what did I just do here? You had to have done some scouting. If you've done some scouting and you had some idea that you liked a quarterback who no one had on the radar to be a top 10 pick, despite whatever rumors you're hearing today about how everyone wanted to trade up for him. I don't believe those rumors because no one has that knowledge other than maybe his agent who is projecting the most positive outcome possible. Then how do you do the Kirk Cousins deal? It's wasteful no matter what, but it could end up working out because if he's the guy who comes in midway through this year and they bench Cousins, it's a sunk cost, it's a ton of money down the drain. But if he's the guy and he's the right guy, then everyone ends up happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, so after sleeping on it overnight, it is a big reach in my data. It's the biggest quarterback reach since Trey Lance. At the same time, I'm of the other mind that it's kind of what you kind of want the people to do. Like you want to be taking multiple swings at quarterback, especially when Kirk we know caps you. The problem is you're still paying for Kirk. The other
Yeah.
problem is I don't think they picked the right quarterback.
Well, I like
Penix,
multiple shots at uncertain quarterbacks.
yes,
One shot at a certain quarterback, and then
yes.
it doesn't really. I don't like to mix those together though.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So to me, I think I would also think they took the wrong quarterback. So Penix turns 24 next month, so he will be 24 his entire
13
rookie season.
days, I believe,
Yeah, and so that
or 12
so
days.
if
Nowadays,
yeah, if the idea that he's
the
gonna
countdown to 24 is in effect.
yeah, I'm not putting it on my calendar. The 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 player who probably could benefit, who so let's say that McCarthy, you said him. McCarthy's 21. In 2
Yeah.
years, McCarthy will be 23. Not really losing much in terms of hitting the prime. Versus Penix, he's going to turn 24. We know age is important and it caps your ceiling as a quarterback. If he's going to sit for 2 years and play after Cousins is gone,
Okay, he's not sitting for 2 years. I'm
I
not listening to whatever
yeah, I
their
don't
press
know. I mean,
conferences.
yeah, I
And
don't
their
know, but
great
like,
problem. They have a great problem, a
yeah,
fantastic problem of him sitting for 3 or 4
mhm.
years. That's not a fantastic problem. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
I agree. Not a
Christian
good problem.
Hackenberg was a great problem for
Yeah,
the Jets because he never played a snap.
yeah, and so to me, I thought it would be more along the lines of like the Eagles route. Like tomorrow, Spencer Rattler would make a ton of sense in the second round.
Yes. Yes.
Especially now that the quarterbacks have all gone in the first round here. Um, but yeah, like the price is just super high too. The eighth overall pick for a guy with his profile, his age, his injury history, um, and the weapons that he was around. I mean, he's going to be in a good situation with Zach Robinson, Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot flexing his muscles. But yeah, there's a kind of a questionable strategy in terms of the resource allocation. But I do think overall, if you have quarterback who is good but not great, can be very good in Cousins, and we can win kind of with him, maybe not because of him, but you get somebody who has some higher ceiling. I just thought McCarthy would be more of that guy, just because everyone kept on comparing him to Cousins, younger, more athletic version of Cousins, and he's 21.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with the age stuff, but at the same point in time, like I've said, it's kind of holding these two things together. Like clearly bad process, right? Yet it still is true, even though it's like a pithy thing to say, it still is true that within reason, you can't really overpay for a quarterback who hits. Now, that's a big that's a that's a big contingency you need to have happen, right? They need to hit, but that is kind of true. So you got to be able to hold these two things in your head at the same time. And the age thing, I agree with you. I agree with it somewhat. At the same time, like again, if the quarterback hits and if he's your guy for the next 10, 15 years, if it's 15 years versus 13 years, or if it's, 8 years versus 11 years, or whatever the difference may be in these different ages, it ends up being consequential, but somewhat immaterial to the main fact of like, is he good or not? And that's the most important thing. But we want to tilt our odds, right? Like that's just table stakes type of odds. The point of being a GM is to tilt your odds, not to tilt your odds against you slightly and make these types of bets. And that's where they went wrong.
The thing that we were ultimately right about is that Dallas Turner should not have been so certain to be the number 8 overall pick.
Yeah.
And
Shout out to
Atlanta, yeah,
Frisco Josh. He won. Defense doesn't matter. The NFL agrees. Everyone agrees now that it doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah. The pivoting to kind of talking about Turner, it's kind of nuts. I think that he kind of was like Mac Jones in that way. It's like he's either going to the 40, he's either going to go to the Falcons or he's going to go to the Bears, but the Bears really probably wanted the wide receiver. I was surprised, Turner was the biggest kind of faller in my data this year. Not a historical faller by any means because he wasn't ranked so high, but yeah, he ended up being just inside my top 10 and he ended up going at 17. And the Vikings traded up twice and blew a ton of draft capital next year's draft.
I think this is what we got to talk about. It's a good seg to come into. This would be like the title of the, like, in the YouTube where you can parcel out that this one is Kwesi canceled. That's the question. Are we canceling him? This was something I used to do on this program until people got like absurdly upset about the fact that I would like cancel Dan Campbell because he said he didn't know about going for 2 down 8. And then he does it, when he ends up playing, but when he ends up being coach. Do we need to cancel Kwesi? Oh, I like that. It's a nice little PR for grinding the mocks there on your sorry, this is great podcasting.
Yeah.
Do we need to cancel him after today? I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it was kind of an absurd trade up for Turner. Especially
he's at least on notice. He's on notice at least.
Because the piece we know also is Dallas Turner that much better than Jared Verse?
Well, that's the thing. Now, okay, so there's a lot of different factors here. So first of all, let's talk about trade up from 42, I think it was, to 23, then from 23 to 17. So all of this, maybe there was some back, if Drake May becomes available, if we can get up to 3, all this sort of stuff. Yeah. Now that ends up being a moot point at this point. So what you're doing basically is you're trading up from 42 to 17 to get Dallas Turner. So you'd have to think that this guy is like worth a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
And it just happened to fall. And as we know, and we've talked about, at least I've written about this, Timo Riske over at PFF has done the actual numbers and research on this, is steals are not really a thing because you need all these teams to be incorrect for you to get a steal. Reaches can be a thing because only one team needs to be incorrect. But are you telling me that, like, if you're saying Turner should have been a top 5 pick, then you're just saying all these other teams are morons that passed on him? And also took a defensive player before him too. He wasn't even the first defensive player to have gone at this point. So the combination of steals are not a thing, and you traded up that much to get a defensive player, not even the quarterback. You didn't even need that in the end. You had all these contingencies and optionalities that ended up going poof. Seems really bad to me. They have a first round pick next year, and they have 2 fifth-round picks. And that's it for a squad that is not very deep on talent. This seemed to me like a year 3 of the regime between him and Kevin O'Connell. Didn't make the playoffs last year. If things don't go well this year, I'm losing my job type of process, just spamming things and really going for it from Kwesi and from the organization.
Yeah, the other piece too is that you're just betting that Dallas Turner is going to be that much better than Jared Verse. I think the other thing too that comes to play is that they might have had, and this is obviously a bias that they have, but I thought that what they think that they would, I think that they thought was going to happen was that they were going to make a trade up into that top tier for the quarterback,
Right.
and they ended up not needing to. They ended up getting a very, very reasonable price from the Jets to move up and swap picks with them in the first round, is swapping some of their late draft picks this year, which I thought was great. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, it's a reasonable price for like a trade that you didn't need to make.
yes,
It's kind
yes,
of like the
exactly.
Bears
It's just
trading up for
guaranteeing.
Trubisky a
That was
while
more rich.
ago.
That was very rich.
Yeah.
But this one was not. This was like swapping
Well, it was
some
much
late
earlier
round
in the
picks.
draft too.
Yes,
I mean, there's a
yes,
big
correct.
difference between going up from, 3
Uh-huh.
to 2 than there is going up from 10 to 11. You know what? Okay, well, this is okay. Sorry, I'm
Oh,
going off of my tangents
yeah.
again.
I
Go
mean,
ahead. Sorry. Go.
I
Yeah.
will say
Good.
that I think that they thought that they were going to be spending money on a quarterback trade, a high quarterback trade, and it didn't materialize. And then they were like, "Well, we have these picks that we were probably going to trade. We weren't thinking about making those picks anyway because we were going to trade it for McCarthy. We value Turner high. Let's just get him." And
No,
so,
that's
like,
obviously what happened, but it's
yeah,
like
and so I think
adding
it's a bad
a
process.
real cost to your sunk cost. I understand
Yes.
it's a sunk cost.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you just you just lump some more
I
cost.
mean, what I think would have been like would have made me like love Quasi more would have been if he had traded back
Yeah, yeah, that would have
from
been
that
funny.
spot
And then even
too.
if he didn't get as much value, like
Yeah,
people may have roasted him for that, but that's
yeah.
that's fine. And well, here's an interesting. Again, this is like a tangent here, but I remember I think it was Daniel Jeremiah or someone was saying if you're the Jets, you should get on the phone to the Vikings and say, "Hey, we have a trade offer here from someone," just to bluff them. But my take is actually you can't that like ruins your relationships. Like, what if you said, "Oh, we got a trade offer here," and then they say, "No, we're not going to trade up," and then you make the pick? Like, you just lied to them. Like,
Yeah,
that sounds bad for
in a
business.
video game that works, but not in
Yeah,
real life when you
yeah,
have to look them in the
yeah. I
eye. I
thought that
mean,
was a
like,
pretty bad. That was a bad take. Like,
yeah,
you could say, "Oh, we're getting phone calls," but I wouldn't say like anything definitive, as he was saying. All right, so moving on here. Bo Nix, you got any Knicks? There's nothing really to say about Knicks other than these absurd Sean Payton via Adam Schefter comments
FOMO.
about him, reminding him of Patrick Mahomes, uh, how he felt about Patrick
Yeah.
Mahomes. So,
I mean, yeah, so Nix is also a big reach. He ended up
yes,
falling quite a bit in my late numbers into like the later first round. Um, I just thought that there was no way that they would do it, but I think George Payton is like he's going to get fired. I think Payton is going to be sticking around, but if they stink this year, which it
yeah,
seems
the fact that he
likely,
made it through the Russell Wilson trade shows me that maybe there were some other decision
yeah,
makers who were very on board with making that happen, and then Peyton was just or
Payton,
Patton, Peyton.
yeah.
They're
So
both
like,
Peyton. This is
yeah,
confusing.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is confusing, but
they
yeah,
just for that reason alone,
I
they should fire him just so we don't have to deal with this
it's
confusion.
once again, I think it's not bad process to draft a quarterback. Obviously, McCarthy wasn't there anymore. You could say that they should have waited, but they don't have other draft picks. Ultimately, the thirst for them was real. I think that maybe they were hoping that Penix would be there.
Yeah.
But
I think the
yeah,
combination though of potentially limited quarterback who's old, who doesn't have a great surroundings is probably not ideal.
hmm I'm guessing. Yeah. I mean, it's not a great situation for Bo Nix to walk into. Um, but he's got a lot of good experience. He's been started 60 games in college. He improved a lot over the last 2 seasons at Oregon from when he started off at Auburn. He doesn't have an injury history. He played in kind of a rinky-dink RPO centric college offense. So, in some ways, I kind of like his profile somewhat better than I do Penix's, just because and he's also kind of on the older side, but he doesn't have the injury history. So
Yeah.
and he'll probably play right away, and because Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham aren't stopping you from playing Bo Nix.
Yeah, yeah. The thing with the Knicks is like I get it that he could fit into maybe more of the prototype of what Peyton has, thinking back to like a Drew Brees type of guy. But then that also makes me think fits into like a limited quarterback who can make quick execution. And then I think, well, do you need to spend the number 12 overall pick to get that type of quarterback? That ends up being the question. So anyway, okay, Brock Bowers. So I was slightly right about Brock Bowers because I was taking the over 12.5 in a lot of different places there. So barely. But then I wish the Raiders did not swoop in and take him, because then we could have got a better. The Raiders, what? Okay, first of all, Antonio Pierce seems like a great guy, motivation, love the things. Nothing from the vibes of this guy has made me think that he's going to make decisions that I agree with. And I don't know if he's making this decision or Telesco, whoever's making this decision is, but not only are you adding like a positional value, which you don't need when you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a lot of other stuff there. You drafted Mayer in the early second round last year. Like, has anyone spent this much draft capital on tight ends in back-to-back drafts in NFL history? And this is a position that you shouldn't be drafting early generally. I don't know what's going on there.
I think it's the decision maker disconnects. David Ziegler made that pick last year, and Telesco probably made the pick this year.
Are they writing him off already? Is it like the new guys come in and they're like, Mayer, he's no good?
If I were someone, I would probably try to buy low for Mayer if I could.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Just because you don't have to pay for the draft pick. You don't even need to pay for the signing bonus. You just need to pay probably some maybe some pick compensation. But yeah, if I was an enterprising team, I think that you probably could get him at a pretty good price. But yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I think I had him like right at 13, so this is kind of right where I thought he would probably end up going. I kind of was hoping he would slip a little bit further because I think he fits in really well with what the Colts would want to do. But the thing that really intrigues me about Bowers is just like the tape is really good. I thought he was a really fun player to watch in college. I think that he's hopefully going to get opportunities, but yeah, like the issue is just like the price is so high and the investment is so high. It just, to me, like they have so many other issues. Offensive line was ripe there for the taking. Fuanga went a pick later. Fautanu went a bunch later. I thought Fuanga would have made a ton of sense for them. They need help on the line. And that way, at least, you can kind of play around with the options you have. So the quarterback situation there is not great, but
you're not liking their depth chart of right tackle of Thayer Munford Jr.
Yep, not loving it. Yeah, I mean, Munford was like an interesting prospect because
has he played a single snap in his career?
He has. Yeah,
he has. Okay. I
think he has. He went from Ohio State. He was a late round pick from Ohio State. He had been a tackle, and then Paris Johnson basically came in and took his lunch, and they moved him to guard. And so that was the big deal. So Munford has played tackle, but he played guard because Paris Johnson Jr.
Okay, you're ruining my just my ignorance here, just to make fun of this guy. But
it's not good.
You're making him into a human being. I don't like you making him into a real.
He's
human
not a
being
good
here.
player. I would prefer to have upgraded at tackle rather than upgraded potentially at tight end. When and if they're going to play both of them, I mean.
Here's another thing. Here's another thing. Just looking at this depth chart. I mean, first of all, I know it's not a long time for like Devontae Adams, but they have Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, right? Like that's one of the few places they've actually invested a lot. If you think about the trade compensation they gave up for Devontae Adams, again, previous regime, but whatever, they exist. They still exist as human beings here. They also got Harrison Bryant, who was a draft pick of the Browns, who I thought was like decent. So they had Bryant at tight end in addition, who's kind of like a move sort of tight end, smaller guy. So they had him. How much does he weigh? 230 pounds. Smaller guy. Like,
that sounds like Bowers. Bowers weighs.
Yeah, it sounds like Bowers, right? I mean, he's like a homeless man's Bowers, but still, like you have him. You have Mayer. What are we doing here? Raiders?
We're trying to recreate the two tight end formations from the Patriots heyday.
It's like Gruden.
Don't ask me who the second tight end was. Okay.
Gruden and Mayock like to draft people like 50 spots before their consensus. The Raiders are like, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to take tight ends who have fallen 5 picks.
Yeah, I mean, Telesco, you can argue Telesco has a type because when he was with the Chargers, he drafted this guy Trey McKitty, a tight end from Georgia. So he likes those tight ends from Georgia. I mean, Mayock and Gruden probably would have loved this pick because they love teams to draft players.
Hunter Henry, that had to be a Telesco pick, right?
Yeah. That was Arkansas. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we're done roasting the Raiders. Sorry, Raiders fans, but it's bad. Okay, we talked Dallas Turner. We talked that trade up. Just for some numbers around this. I have about $25 million loss now, according to some new updated numbers for the Vikings and all their shenanigans here, which is equivalent to about a mid-first round pick. So, in order to move up one spot for a quarterback that you probably didn't need to, and to move up from the middle of the second round to the middle of the first round, you gave up an additional first round pick, essentially, in this draft, not even like a future first round pick type of value. So,
Yeah, I saw the
um,
Timo Risque chart he put out where he
yeah,
said that the Vikings win, or sorry, the Vikings lose this trade like 2/3 of the time.
yeah,
So, well, especially the Turner trade, like yeah, like that's rough. And then just you're sacrificing that future. Just kind of, it's not the analytically sound thing to do, but it's the desperate thing to do.
yes. Okay, so is there anything else that jumps out to you here in this first round until we get to? I guess we have some trade backs from
Yeah,
the Bills, which got a lot of hype. I mean, maybe I'll point out the only other like tier 3 type of player. Now I have 3 different tiers: 1, 2, and 3 for non-quarterbacks. 1, tackles, edge, interior rushers. 2, cornerbacks and wide receivers, which are more like late first round, second round, third round type of players. And then 3 are like, wait till the third round or probably even later if you can. And that would be like running back, interior offensive line, tight end, safety, all those sorts of guys. So the only other guy who was not in tier 1 or 2 was Graham Barton, center to the Bucs. So that would be the other pick that I would kind of pan no matter what. I mean, I know he's a few spots below his consensus ranking, but again, well, what are we doing here? Don't we need depth somewhere else first?
yep. The interesting picks for me were the two cornerbacks who went 2 picks apart, Quinion Mitchell from Toledo and Terrion Arnold from Alabama, who were both ranked much higher in my numbers. So, you know, I had Arnold as they were the 15th and 16th ranked players respectively, with Mitchell a little bit higher than Arnold. And so, I thought that was really interesting that they went a lot later. The Lions made a trade up to go get Arnold, and I'm of the mind that it's sort of a similar issue with the similar in spirit to the Dallas Turner trade. Now that Arnold has fallen so far, is he that much better than Nate Wiggins, who went a few picks later to the Ravens?
Yeah,
Um,
no, I would compare it to like whatever they talk about these trades where you're like trading into a tier. So essentially, they probably had Mitchell and Arnold as being like 1A, 1B for the best cornerbacks in the draft. And then when Mitchell went, they got on the phones and they started wanting to trade with whoever. Jacksonville already traded back and said, we want to stick in here and take Brian Thomas. So the next pick was the first pick that they could get into. Which
yeah.
makes sense in some ways because Arnold, again, big board 13th versus 24th for Wiggins. So it was 11th and 13th for Mitchell and Arnold versus 24th for Wiggins. I think
But you got to
these
reset
trades.
though. You got to reset the eval at some point a little bit. It's
No,
not a
I
it's
agree.
not
I
a
think it's
reach,
merely
but
a
like you're not
mistake.
getting as
I'm
yeah.
going through their thinking. That's what
Yeah,
their
it's just
thinking
not as
is.
big
Their
of a
thinking is
value.
we got to get this tier. We want a cornerback, which again, why lock in on any position? This is the tier. He's not going to make it to our pick here, most likely. So let's move up and get him. And the Jacksonville wouldn't trade out of 23. I think that's like the course of events, I would say.
Yeah, I can see it. I think Arnold is a good player. I thought that he had enough talent to go in the top 10. Just the way that the quarterbacks and the offense that was the focus of the first, you know, 15 or 14 picks pushed his value down. So you can argue that the quarterbacks went higher, and so that contributed, and then all these offensive players. So, but yeah, I thought that I was surprised that that Mitchell and Arnold fell. Both of them fell very far. I thought at least one of them would go earlier. So yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense for the Eagles. I think a lot of people were projecting them to trade up because they've been kind of active in the trade market in recent years. Whether they moved up for Jordan Davis, they so among others. But yeah, I thought that staying and taking the more athletic Quinion Mitchell was really nice pick from the Eagles.
Yeah, yeah. What's an interesting contrast, and I haven't been in love with the Ravens from a positional value standpoint, what they did in the draft last year and some other times, but they don't trade up at least. So it's a good contrast to show that they were one pick below the Lions. They stood and took Nate Wiggins versus the Lions giving up. What did they give up exactly as part of this? So they gave up a 3rd round pick and they traded out for a 7th round pick are basically worthless. Like, I understand pick swaps are great. A 7th round pick in 2025 also. So as worthless as you can get. I'm not even sure how that gets thrown into the to the mix. But they gain a 3rd round pick and then they take the next guy on the board. That's like perfect. Or they don't give up a 3rd round pick, I should say. So it's kind of like opportunity cost wise. If they're thinking about that same decision, right? Vis-a-vis the Lions, they're like, if they were in a 2-team competition against the Lions, they're gaining a 3rd round pick and they're betting on the next player lower. And that's what I would do, every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I would make the same bet if I were the Ravens.
Yeah, I think, this draft was a lot more chalky just overall, even just outside of the, top 10. I had 28 of my top 32 go in the top 32, and the lowest that I had a guy go in the 2nd round was probably Xavier Legette. And so, and I thought there was a good chance he would go in the 1st round anyway, or at least the very early 1st pick in the 2nd round. That's kind of probably maybe a bad process move by the Panthers to trade up 1 pick.
No, it's horrible. I mean, the thing that doesn't get factored into this trade up also in a lot of people's minds is there's like a 30% salary drop between the last pick of the 1st round and the 1st pick of the 2nd round. Yeah, you gain the 5th year option, but it's not really that valuable, quite honestly. Having a year in advance and you're paying like franchise tag light sort of prices on that. So it's a 30%. I mean, every little bit helps. And I think the Bills, they're a little short on the old cash salary cap. So that's probably part of the Bills' decision too.
Yes. The other thing is that the Panthers didn't they had, so number one is they currently just don't have a lot of capital. So once again, you're trading from the future, which you need, to get into the present, which you don't need as much. It's a completely new regime. No one's getting fired next year, ideally.
Yeah.
And you don't take the advantage of the 49ers making a pretty big reach, drafting a player that was solidly in the 2nd round and Ricky Pearsall at pick 31. So
everyone seems to like him, though. He's getting a lot of hype. There's this video with CJ Stroud talking about it. But I did think one thing was interesting in the CJ Stroud video is he said he put it all together this year versus last year. I mean, dude is 23 years old. He's going to turn 24 years old in September. So maybe he had a little bit of an advantage versus these other guys putting it together at this age.
Yeah, I mean, Pearsall was, tested really well athletically.
Yeah.
I thought Legette was going to be the target for the 49ers. So I thought the 49ers were going to go wide receiver. The thing is that there's just so many other wideouts in between. So for the 49ers, yeah, it's a reach. If you're going to take a wide receiver, I think that's not the one that I would take.
Yeah.
But they have had success with picking some receivers, but some of their track record is not as good. But overdrafting players is not always a great move. But you're also saying I think the Panthers is a little more just egregious because they lack draft capital so much. And then also you're saying Legette is better than Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, and so like. It's a jump for me that they didn't. I don't think they needed to do. And if you don't get Legette, it's not a big deal. Take Ladd McConkey tomorrow.
They were very pumped in their draft room.
Yeah, he's from South Carolina. They have loved taking players from the Carolinas in the past. J.C. Horn, Ikem Ekwonu, and then you can add Xavier Legette to the list. I don't know.
They promised him. They promised him they were going to take him right at 33.
All right.
So they had to do that. Okay, let's talk about some of these Bills moves because I'm very interested in them. Number one, I'm like extremely interested to see who they're going to end up taking. Do they go back again from 33? A lot of people like to get up to 33. So I'm very interested to see who they're going to take because then it comes to the thinking of, did they have like, and this would be almost an impossibility in an NFL team draft room. In my draft room, it'd be very possible. It'd be almost an impossibility to say like they had like 6 receivers and they said, "Oh, we'll take whoever's left at the end of this tier." That's good process, but I don't think any team operates on that sort of manner. So number one, are they just not going to take a receiver? Are they thinking cornerback maybe? And there's a few cornerbacks that they're looking at here. And once that first tier of cornerback was gone, they were like, okay, we are okay with a few different guys here in the second tier of cornerback. Maybe that's another option there. Are they just in like total flip the switch mode where they went from all in to all out and they're like, we're going to trade back over and over and over again? And what I kind of like of what they did here is I know they did not get much of a return on these. There were a lot of pick swaps involved in that mitigates some of the benefit because you lose that upside outcomes on your own picks going forward. At the same point in time, I think a lot of trades should be made that aren't made because people have their draft charts and they don't get to where the draft chart is. Whereas they could say, oh, we're going to gain value on this trade, but we're not hitting the draft chart value that we should be getting. So then we're not going to make this trade. And that seems somewhat irrational to me. I mean, within reason, you don't want to like take no return on a trade, but within reason, teams should probably be more liquid with these picks and be willing to just pick up little trades. And if you can trade back multiple times, if they trade back a third time from this pick, then you look at the total value of what they've gained and the salary that they've saved moving back on this first pick, and you can get a pretty good chunk there for the Bills.
Yeah, I like the moves. Yeah, the positions that I think that they're interested in the top 50 wide receivers still heavily stockpiled, and so only yeah, we had over the we had 7 go. So but there's still more that are good. Like I said, I think Lad McConkey would be a great pick. I like Adonai Mitchell a lot, and those are both players who are available at the top of the first tier, first picks of the second round. And so if they were going to stay,
I
I would
don't know
think
much
they would
about
go.
McConkey, but the fact that he do they need another like a underneath receiver? I think they have like 7 of them right now. Is he not an underneath receiver?
Well,
I'm
so
just racist. I'm just racist, so I assume that
okay, yeah, I was going to
he's
say you need
underneath.
to watch the tape, bro. But
No, I just see him, and I'm like,
I think
okay, this guy's
analytically, I think people view him as a slot mostly because of some of those kind of biased factors.
yeah.
But and people are comparing him a lot to Cooper Cup. He's a really crisp route runner. He ran really great
Wow.
routes in the drills at the Senior Bowl.
Feel like I'm talking to
Um,
Daniel Jeremiah here.
I
Go with
like
it.
I like Adonai Mitchell here. I thought that he was going to be their pick in the first round, and
Yeah.
so to me, I like
But the
Adonai
fact that
Mitchell
they're
a lot.
willing to move off of it multiple times
Yeah.
makes me wonder about it a little bit. And I do
Yeah.
think the Bills is also another interesting contrast of putting them in exact opposition to the Panthers and the Chiefs, who are paying up for a receiver in the same tier, basically.
Hmm.
Like so the Bills are in the right here, but
Yes.
we'll see how it works out.
And I think your characterization of they were all in, they were trading up all the time to try to get what they thought were to maximize
Well, and
their
the Von Miller
chances.
signing
Yeah.
was absurd. Yeah,
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 Von Miller, but then trading up, for Kyer Elam, and that didn't work
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Trading up for,
Drafting a
um,
running back. Why are you
yeah,
doing
Dalton
that in the second
Kincaid,
round?
drafting
Yeah.
the running back in the second round. They had done that before.
They moved up for Kincaid too. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So to me, it kind of represents maybe a pivot to more value-based approach, which I like. And I think that they were right to do it. The wide receiver group is really deep, and there's still solid options that they must have thought were all grouped together. And like I said, I like Adonai Mitchell a lot. He was probably maybe the top player left on my board in the top of the second round, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing about okay, I'm gonna step out of my core competency area here and talk about this Xavier Worthy pick for the Chiefs. Well, we'll still stay with the core competency for a second. So it's not like everyone is just drooling over themselves as pick. It's not like he is a guy who's really projected to be taken in the 20s or something like that. Like he's reach-ish according to the metrics, right?
Yeah. Um, I thought he was going to be he was the last receiver I had in round one. People had been pairing him to the Chiefs at the end of the first round, and so I think that that's kind of what this was. It was kind of a little bit more of like
This is
a
definitely a guy
player
they
who can
could have
match.
potentially gotten if they stood.
I
So
think so.
that seems like that always smells bad from a trade up perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, it
It's like
didn't it
not
didn't
only should
look great.
you be comfortable with taking multiple people, you could have gotten the same exact player without trading up. They didn't give up much though, but yeah.
Potentially. I mean, I think that I thought that, from your perspective, that teams value the 40 a lot more. Didn't really hold with Worthy here. Um, he's the kind of player who's really interesting. He had a really
Well, he's so
solid.
small. He's so
He's
small. Yeah.
small. He had a really strong start to his career, and then kind of fell off a little bit as the Texas team got better. But yeah, no, I mean, I think Worthy is definitely worthy of being a first rounder. I think he has that special skill, the speed that they really like. Um, and I think that people were thinking like, oh, they used to have this Tyreek Hill now they can kind of refill the Tyreek Hill role. But Tyreek Hill is more than just a speed guy, and Worthy is definitely not as good of a route runner as Tyreek. But um, yeah, I mean, I think it can hurt wide receiver definitely. I think they're kind of maybe also in a similar perspective. They're kind of just tired of not having good wide receivers, and they wanted to take one in the first round, and he was the one that they wanted and targeted, and they went up and got him. And so
Yeah,
a lot of teams I've seen, a lot of teams have players that they really are targeting at certain picks. And even if
yeah.
there are better options or just as good options, they kind of sometimes will settle in and be like, we really want this player. What do we have to do to get this player? This is the guy that we want. We think he's going to go. And the Chiefs, you know, the future is now basically for them all the time. And so sometimes I think that they feel like there aren't really that many consequences to them making these decisions that we think on other teams would be minus EV.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing is, like, I get it. It's only a 1-year deal, but you did go get Marquise Brown, right? And if things work out there, maybe you could bring him back. I'm smelling some similarities in what they may be able to do as far as a player. Um, I mean, Brown's not big, but I mean, he's smallish. Also, he's not as small as Worthy, of course. You know what Worthy looks like, and we never got a chance to see Devontae Smith like run a 40 or something. When I saw him running the 40, he looks like you're watching a YouTube video of like a great flag football player or something like that. Like he just doesn't look like an actual guy who could take a hit on an NFL field. But we'll see. But anyway, so they do have Marquise Brown, right? So I don't know if there was the immediate need there. Maybe they really want to have a second guy. But I also think from the Chiefs' perspective is like you look at a lot of receivers and their ADOT has gone down. Like Jamar Chase's ADOT's gone down. Like I don't know if you can just force long throws into an offense just by having guys who can run fast. I mean, maybe we'll end up. I mean, Mahomes did win the MVP last season where he had MVS doing wind sprints, Juju Smith-Schuster, all this other stuff. Not 2 seasons ago, or whatever you want to say. And then they did win the Super Bowl last year without these types of players. So it's interesting to see that they're kind of doubling up on this deep threat after not having it. And everyone assumes like things are going to go through the roof. And it's like, well, Mahomes had one of his best seasons in 2022 without that sort of option. I mean, unless you're counting MVS in there, he at least not an extraordinary option is running down the field.
Yeah, I think it does kind of potentially raise the floor, even if they have different, similar skill sets. That I think maybe is the danger that you become too homogenous, especially as Kelsey ages.
Yeah,
Um,
Kelsey ages, and who else do they have, right? Like, who else do they have? Can you rely on Sky Moore? Can you rely on Kadarius Toney? Like, obviously not. Can you rely on who else is going to be your underneath sort of guy when Kelsey is really very old at this point?
yeah, I think it's kind of more of a replacement for Mecole Hardman, maybe. um,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
view, Worthy as a replacement, or sorry, yeah, like, Brown as a replacement for MVS, and Worthy as a replacement for Mecole Hardman.
Yeah,
So,
no, I
and then
see
the
that.
offense
But
kind of
neither one of
continues
those
to evolve.
guys were like, target hogs.
No.
Maybe they could be more of a target hog. I guess we'll end up seeing on that one. Anything else? Anything else big you want to talk about before I let you go here thematically, what to expect, anything else? Or you got some plugs? You got some plugs for us? More plugs?
Not too much. No, I mean the draft, like I said, really pretty chalky. The biggest, reach for the player was Ricky Pearsall, and he was still in my top 50. So no players outside of the top 50 went on day one. And Pearsall was projected to go, well, he went at the end of round one, so it's not like it's a reach, but it's not as huge of a reach. And the 49ers and the Rams are both teams who kind of take like who I look at their draft capital over expected, and I don't think it necessarily impacts them because of how like high level the coaching is, and also they just have smart decision makers. I'm not always a huge fan of their drafting by my numbers, but they have had good results, and they don't have superstar quarterbacks. So I'm intrigued a bit by the 49ers selection here. I don't think it's a signal that, one of their star receivers is on the move, but there was discussions about, Ayuk and or Debo, or yeah, one of the two of them being on the move, and I would think it would probably be Debo but Ayuk, because he demands an extension. Debo has already been extended, but I thought that was a good move. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't too much drama. I mean, there's only 3 players, or 4 players in my top 32 that didn't go, and 3 of them I thought would not go in the top 32, just if you asked me. So, Jerzon Newton, the defensive tackle from Illinois, who people loved and raved about. Some people thought he was, one of the top defensive players in the draft. He is going to be in this early second round probably. He had a foot injury. Same thing with Kool-Aid McKinstry. I was really out on Jackson Powers Johnson, who ended up in the late numbers in my data. And at the end of the day, Cooper DeJean is probably the biggest surprise to me of players that didn't go in round 1, who should go in early round 2. Also had a little bit of an injury. So the players that didn't go in round 1, I'm not surprised. And so the cupboard is still fully stacked. Grinding the Mocks is fully on board. Nothing too crazy has happened in this draft that would make the second round different than what I expected it.
Yeah. I guess maybe some of that safety talk.
Yeah.
Again, racism.
Yes.
Coming into play here.
But yeah, in terms of plugs, I'm say look to this space and others as I do more kind of work in the off season. But yeah, really stoked about the night we had last night. I'm always a little anxious coming into the draft just because things can be a little unpredictable, but this year was really predictable. And, I come back to what we talked about last week when we said, when people say the draft is unpredictable, it usually is more predictable than we think. And I didn't see that many points in the draft where there would be these huge inflection points that really impacted the draft. And Penix, you could say that Penix kind of changed the course of the draft a little bit, but it turns out that because there weren't that many trades, it didn't really have, or not many meaningful trades. It didn't really shake up the order too much. I was hopeful that I would hit 30, which was the number that I hit 2 years ago. But I'm very pleased with 28, and we move on to day 2.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with the 49ers. That is an interesting point that maybe. I mean, I don't have a lot to touch on here because everything is so speculative, but it did seem like they were willing to trade him. So I guess they couldn't get a first-round pick from a team with the team knowing the type of contract they would have to pay for him. Then they now do have a replacement, quote unquote, for Ayuk if possible. They could trade Samuel. The only reason I didn't see him trading Samuel is they get no cap savings this year. They take a hit. They're just eating on the dead cap this year. They get some for next year, and I just don't know what his value is right now. Like at his age, having some injuries the last couple of years, that it just seemed like Ayuk was more the guy to trade just because you could get big value. So I don't know. I guess maybe if they can peel together a second-round pick and a future second-round pick, they would still trade Ayuk today. Maybe they'll roll them all and then end up making that Samuel trade next season when the benefit actually happens, and maybe his performance and value is a little bit better. Well, we'll see. But it just the one thing that sounds like for sure is that they couldn't get the first round pick for him that they probably wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I think Pearsall and Ayuk played together at Arizona State when Jaden Daniels was quarterback. So
yeah, I know. It's like nowadays,
at least
it's hard keeping track of that. We're going to need that immaculate grid, but just for college, just for different colleges, everyone has played with. All right, Ben Robinson, thank you for joining me so much. I know it's a busy morning for you. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'll come back at you Monday, probably. I don't know, maybe this weekend. We'll see. Nobody's watching these things on the weekend, though, right? So probably Monday with all the reviews. Check out Grinding the Mocks, everything else. And other than that, I'll be talking to everyone next Monday. Talk to you later.